Why South Sudan? An Every Village podcast where we answer questions about the world's youngest nation. The question of the day is, how does our U.S. staff pour into our South Sudanese staff? Hey everyone, this is Tiana Johnston, the host of this podcast called Why South Sudan? As a member of the U.S. staff, I wanted to invite Andrew Brown, another U.S. staff member.
Hey, Tiana.
Here to the studio. All right. Okay, so one fun fact is that we are actually, I'm trying to think of how many total staff that we have. I know we're over 90.
That's right.
And then in America, you want to say the grand total currently?
Yeah, we just grew to 8.
That's exciting.
Yeah. It is. So
What was the most that we've ever had for U.S. staff, do you think?
I think we're something like 17, 18.
Wow. I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
Because we went down all the way to 3 at one time.
Well, I mean, I started with 3.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we've ebbed and flowed.
That is so fun.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's very exciting that we're growing and expanding. And yeah, great news is that we're actually going to be expanding outside of Houston. So praise the Lord.
Yeah.
So exciting.
Yeah.
So the question today is, how do we pour into our South Sudanese staff, being we live across the world, and yeah, how can we effectively, pour into our staff?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was thinking about it, kind of shooting it back at you at the end, but I think I'm going to start with this because I think this is important, to notate at the very beginning, and that is there's a little bit of inherent bias to the question, so I'm not criticizing, but it could sound like it's a one-way street, and the truth is it is far from that. So, the implication of how does the U.S. staff pour into the South Sudanese could imply that the South Sudanese don't pour into us, and that's just not true.
That's a good one.
So I thought about answering the question, then getting to the end, but I want to start with this. So I'm going to actually kick back to you quickly. So I'm going rogue. But Tiana, like as you think about, all the years that you've been working with the South Sudanese, what are some ways that they poured into you?
Oh man. Yeah. I feel like so many. Definitely. I think, I would say, I guess to say they poured into me, I think even what they still do is just encourage my faith. I think even just still being connected to them, being able to talk to them regularly, hearing updates, hearing how their faith is still strong, or if not stronger. And that's just, oh man, that just like fires me up. One, to know, that they get it, that they know the Lord, that they walk with him, and that they delight in the Lord. Like that is the best gift by all means. And I would say like another way of pouring into me is, oh man, I mean, for years, me and my husband, one, as I lived there as a single, we prayed for me to be married. In South Sudan, it's very important for especially for women to be married and to have children. And like, that is just a desire for so many. And I was single at the time. And so we were praying, and I was, they would ask like, why aren't you married? You're an old woman. 'Cause I was in my 30s or late 20s. At the time, turning 30, and I would just tell them that I'm waiting for God to bring the one. And so they prayed with me, they believed with me, and then when God brought, my husband Daniel is such an answer to prayer, they all celebrated. There's actually, because I'm a lot of friends, that do have access to Facebook. They are friends with me on social media, and so when me and Daniel just started dating, we went to a friend's wedding. I was like a bridesmaid, and so then I posted a picture of me and Daniel, looking very nice. And all my South Sudanese were like, congratulations. Like, and we're like, no, we're not married. Like but just like the concept of dating is just not a thing. So that made me chuckle. I had to really explain it to Daniel. But then also when, we struggled with infertility, and just being able to share that desire with the South Sudanese, and then believing and praying with me, and then us miraculously getting pregnant with our baby girl. And so that's just been such a blessing to have them celebrate with us, but also know that they poured into us through prayer and standing with us.
That's so good. And those are some really beautiful ways. And man, I mean, they poured into me in so many ways. I could talk the rest of the podcast on just this. So I'll try to keep it succinct so I can get to the original question. But, they've taught me generosity. I think about the South Sudanese. I love how their concept of money, honestly, because, it's a cash-based society. They don't have credit cards, right? So they're walking around with cash presumably in their pocket. our staff at least at all times, some form of cash, and they're walking on the road, and somebody with need comes up to them, or they see someone in need, and what do? They just pull the money out from their pocket and they give something. They're not asking questions about, is this person going to use it on liquor, or is this person going to, what's their need? They just give because they see a need and they respond, and they don't ask questions, and they don't. It's not like they have a ton themselves. Like, it truly could be the money that they were going to use on lunch that day, or on dinner, or some need, what we would consider a need, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they just give it, and they just trust that God will provide for them at the right time. That's a beautiful concept. It's amazing. So open-handed and not analyzing or questioning. So that's a way they've done it. They're so committed. You think about, they're working in a very, very hard environment. There's, there's physical challenges, the heat and the lack of transport, and, all the walking and the snakes and the scorpions, and the drought, the floods, the geopolitical instability. They're working in a really tough place, and the culture, frankly, is just not that easy as well. Lots of conflict, a lot of criticism, a lot of division. There's some really bad political leaders that cause problems. There's just a lot, and they're committed to the work, though. They don't quit. They don't give up. And the South Sudanese are some of the most resilient people in the world. They've just been through suffering, and they get back up and keep going. And that's amazing. They've taught me what real friendship looks like in so many ways. They've taught me, they poured into me in so many ways through the lessons they teach me, just through modeling, and then to your point, as well, just the prayers, the belief in me, and the ways they encourage me just with their words. It's unbelievable, and some of my I just say, just because of the things we've been through, some of my deepest friendships in the world belong to South Sudanese, and so it would be silly for us to just focus on one direction when you're talking about that type of impact that they've made in our lives. They pour into us, and this is very much a South Sudanese led ministry. So anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way so that then we can get to the second side. So how do we pour into them? Well, hopefully in reciprocal ways, right? Through the same things that we just said, is modeling behavior and godliness, hopefully, through teaching, active teaching of spiritual matters, as well as, practical and professional matters, through prayer as well, through financial support, both ministerially, as an organization, but also personally. All the time there's different things that come up or the staff members in their lives, and different ones of us will feel led to support them personally. And so that's a great thing as well. So, those are kind of the general things. I would say, but as an organization responsibly, what are we responsible for? Most of our staff came to us with very little education. That's just the case in South Sudan, across South Sudan. Very few of them have even finished high school. Now that number's growing some. They've had opportunities either because of Every Village sponsoring them, or just giving them margin to be able to go to school or continue school, or send their families to school. So we're seeing some shifting in that, but still, even the schooling in South Sudan is just frankly not that great, unfortunately, because the teachers aren't trained, the facilities aren't good, they don't have access to books, they don't have a lot of different things, and so we're working with a pretty uneducated people. But let me quote one of my favorite verses in the Bible, and particularly probably one of my definite favorite ones for South Sudan. And I tell this to our South Sudanese leaders, but in Acts chapter 4, Peter and John have been arrested, and the Sanhedrin has brought them before, and Peter speaks very boldly about their commitment to Christ and his work, regardless of the opposition that they face from the Sanhedrin. And it says there in Acts 4, it says, when they looked at them and they saw that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they realized they'd been with Jesus, and that made all the difference. And so our staff are not inadequate in any measure as in schooling or professional experience or financial matters or in wisdom, or they're not inadequate in any of those things as long as they spend time with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And because the truth is, they're never going to catch up with us in terms of educational opportunities. I can whip out an Excel spreadsheet faster than any of them probably will ever be able to. And it's not because they're dumb. It's just frankly, they don't have access to computers and schooling and all that, right? But it doesn't matter. They've taught me so much about Christ. And so focusing on those matters is really important, though, is, because of that lack of education, we have a great opportunity to help bring them along and teach them. What does it look like to reconcile finances, account for your expenses? That's tough because not only do you have a lack of education, but you have cultural barriers to professional methods. Because as an example, in South Sudan, like, it is culturally offensive if you ask somebody how they spent the money, like bring the receipts, because they think that you're basically accusing them of not being honest, right? Well, I understand the culture, but the truth is, as a professional organization, we can't operate that way. We have to have receipts, or maybe they don't have receipts because they're in a paperless world, but they've got to then come back in their logbook and take note of those expenses, right? We have to be above reproach from even a Western perspective in that, because we're a professional organization. And so teaching them that, but then working through the implications, because at first when we started asking our managers and staff to report on their expenses, there was some offense, right? They didn't believe that we trusted them. So the handling of finances is a big one. But computer skills, communication skills, what does it look like to work with, the radio station? Of course, there's all kinds of, radio tools that they're using, softwares and others, how to use all of that effectively and at high quality. But then communication, writing an email. What do you do, when you've never, it's so intuitive to us because most of us just grew up with that. Or even if, I'm old enough to remember the days before email, of course, but it came in young enough that I picked it up quickly, right? Mm-hmm. And so,
but imagining even having to write in not even your mother tongue, like,
yes,
this is a whole different language.
Totally. And so, so then most recently, for instance, AI is coming in, right? And we see some staff members using it a little bit and some not at all. They don't even know what it is, and that's okay. But at our last leadership retreat, we had a whole session on proper uses of AI, trying to equip them. We had a session on proper uses of social media. An example, Gianna, is, in South Sudan, unfortunately, the South Sudanese have seen a lot of dead bodies. That's just, all South Sudanese have seen death. Mm-hmm. They've been confronted with it, through disease and then through war, sadly. And so for them, the idea of seeing a picture of a dead body is just it's not like a weird thing. And so it's not uncommon for our staff to have received a picture of a dead body who's been killed or died from disease or what have you, and posted on social media. Mm-hmm. And
I've seen it.
I've seen it multiple times. And I can't blame them. They just don't know any different. But it's a bit shocking when you see it, right? Or other things like that, right? Instead of getting angry or like thinking that they're just wildly inappropriate, you have to have an understanding and then just be patient and teach, mm-hmm. And then teach again and then teach again. And that's pouring into them. Being patient is the best way to pour in. Having grace, trying to put yourself in their shoes as best as possible. It's not going to be fully possible, but trying to understand their worldview has been shaped by the bush and the ways they grew up. Our staff, I can guarantee all of our staff today, the first time they ever put on shoes was they were probably teenagers. Like, mm-hmm. They never wore shoes, okay? If you didn't wear shoes for 15 years of your life, you can't be expected to use email properly, okay? It's just a general rule, right? And so there's so many different ways of that we pour in that way. The other thing, though, that's been really neat recently is, I think because of their years of war and exposure to challenges, all of that, sometimes people in the midst of the forest, they see the trees, but they don't see the forest that they're in. And I think that developing a vision for their nation of what's possible. Of course, all the South Sudanese want a better nation. All the South Sudanese want a more prosperous future for their kids. That's not hard. But seeing a pathway to that and having a vision for what a godly nation could look like, a prosperous society could look like, a lot of them struggle with that because they haven't had any exposure to the outside world. They don't have a model. And so one of the things that's been really neat, I believe in my role recently, I've realized, as the leader of every village, like, vision casting is a huge responsibility, is continuing to call us to the vision that God's put for this nation. And what's been really neat is I really believe that, speaking hope into their nation and giving them that, not a false hope at all. Our hope is in Christ. But truly, there is prophetic fulfillment that will happen. Every tongue, tribe, and nation will be at the throne. We can be confident that South Sudan and his chosen people will be one for Christ. We're confident. So we're a part of fulfilling the mission of God. And there's specific prophecies about the land of Cush, South Sudan, that we've talked about on this podcast, that I believe every village is a part of fulfilling those prophecies. And so, as we've gotten to speak into that, I see the vision of our staff growing, and the vision for their nation, the vision for their kids, what it looks like. What does it look like to be a godly dad? What does it look like to be a godly mom, or a husband or a wife? How do we handle marriage issues, or how do we handle parenting issues? And so it's been just a glorious joy in my life to see, our staff growing in the Lord, growing in their vision for the nation, growing their leadership, and as I think back through the years of investment that we've made, I really see the seeds that we've sown are bearing fruit. It's a wonderful thing. So, man, I could point on so many other things, but you notice one thing I didn't really bring up a whole lot is the infrastructure. And I still believe that's one way we pour into the South Sudanese, no doubt about it. So critical. But Tiana, I'll quote one of your favorite quotes that I've made, that South Sudan is a graveyard of well-intentioned giving. And so if you just focus on the infrastructure, pouring in the infrastructure, and you don't focus on the hearts, the people, the character, the systems, that inner quality of the nation, then, the infrastructure is going to get old and rot. It's going to break down. It's going to be, robbed or stolen. Moth and rust will destroy. But the inner qualities, that will never change. And so, that's why, of course, those, every water well that we drill, or every radio tower that we build, it's a huge way we pour into the South Seas. But man, it means nothing if the hearts aren't one for Christ. And so that's why we spend most of our time focusing on that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so, so good. Oh man, I feel like you hit so many different layers, and I thought it was so good. But I think something I do want to really highlight is our leadership retreat, which we've done a podcast recently on. And so if you want to go back and listen, please do. But I feel like that one is so important, because we're pouring into the leaders for them to go and pour in the staff. Because, we can only do so much, but for us to pour into our leaders and each location, that they're going to walk as ambassadors of Christ. They're going to walk in integrity. And that's going to influence and affect the staff there.
Yeah, the ripple effect approach for sure is, while we want to see South Sudan built as a nation for Christ, our focus isn't really on the nation as a whole, like meaning the U.S. staff. Our focus is on those that God's put in our immediate path, which is our key leaders, and letting them pour into the rest of the staff, and letting the rest of the staff pour into their communities and their nation, right? And it's a ripple effect, that starts in the center and goes out. And so, yeah. And we try pouring into them with just generously, giving them rich experiences and opportunities, bringing them out to Uganda for many years. The leaders for a retreat was intentional and important to expose them to different ways of thinking and different ways of living, and different cultures, different foods, different transport options, all that. That is helping build up a vision for what the world could be like for them in the future. It's just like us whenever we travel, whether it's for work or for pleasure or whatever, vacation, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's amazing to go back to antiquity and go to Rome or Greece and see these ancient buildings, because, it's fun to see, but it also builds our understanding of how the world was, our understanding of history and appreciation. You can go to Athens and see Mars Hill where Paul preached, right? And so as a Christian, there's richness to that. I've never been to Israel. I know you have, Tiana.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's got to be just
so
an amazing
cool
experience, because the things that you read about come alive.
Mm-hmm.
That's all, those antiquities. But then there's the modern world that we go, and you can visit places and you're just like, whoa, this is crazy different. But it gives you ideas, or it just gives you an appreciation for where you're from, or what. So many different things are related to the experiences that we see and touch and feel and know. And the South Sudanese need that as well, because they've never seen these things. So being generous with them and pouring them into those experiences, and then and then of course we employ our staff and we pay them pretty well because we want them to be able to take care of their families. They're leaders of this nation. These are really important, good jobs for them, and so we're still a ministry. It's still a calling for sure. But that's never an excuse to take advantage of people and view them as commodities and just underpay them because they're called by God. That's just, to me, that's dishonoring. Instead, we can be investing in them and pouring to them. And, it's a joy to me when I see one of our staff members that's saved enough money to be able to build a permanent house rather than a mud hut. And because that's their vision. I mean, mud huts might sound super, quaint and kind of cool to us, but the truth is living in a mud hut's not easy.
Scorpions.
Right. Yeah. That among many things. Right.
Yeah.
And so why wouldn't you? I mean, would we be satisfied living in a mud hut in Houston? Or I mean, that's so foreign to us. But would we? Many of us might start in a 1,200 square foot house, or maybe we start in a 500 square foot apartment. Right. Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with that. And if we stay that the rest of our lives, that's awesome. But most of us, that's not where we stay the rest of our lives. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's the same for the South Sudanese. It should be, right? And so, you touched a button. I'm getting passionate. Sorry, better rein myself back in. But there's so many different ways that are just, a gift from God that we get to pour into.
Yes. Oh, it's so good. I really enjoyed this one. I probably say that every time, but I really did.
Yeah, and these topics where I lose track of time and I just keep going. Sorry.
No, it's so good. Well, I also like how we started out with how the South Sudanese pour into us. Because it is not just us with them. I mean, they're friends. They're people that we genuinely care about. They're not just statistics. They're people. They're friends. They're family. Oh, I just love it.
Yeah.
It's so good. Well, thanks so much, Andrew. All right. We invite everyone back to the next episode as we answer the question, does every village ever send South Sudanese to college? Take care.